Chapter 6 I hit the wall with a whoomph and a host of white stars danced and cartwheeled across my vision. I blinked several times in utter disbelief, not trusting my eyes because what I was seeing was impossible. Standing guard over the stairwell exit was a skeletally thin creature with maggot-white skin, 6 arms protruding from its gaunt torso, and an honest-to-God toilet for a head. A tag flashed above it. Dweller 0.023A, Janitorial Handyman Level 3. This restroom is for employees only, the janitorial handyman said. Its voice burbled and gurgled like mud stuck in a drainpipe. You are not an employee. You do not belong in the lobby. A thick purple tongue slithered out of the toilet bowl, dripping fat beads of glistening blue drool. You will be removed. Without waiting for my perfectly reasonable response, the monster lurched toward me, quickly eating up the distance between us with its long legs. My mind raced through all my available options in the split second I had before this thing tried to eat me. I could run, but that was the worst option by far. The exit door to the stairwell was locked and I'd shut the door to the bathroom to prevent the nightmarish lobby greeters from sneaking up on me while I had my back turned. I'd be able to get the door open, but it would take precious seconds that I didn't have to spare. My next option was the slammer, still gripped in my left palm. The spell timer had reset, so I had 2 minutes of relative safety, but there was one major problem. The interior of the spell dome was larger than the inside of this bathroom. If I activated it here and now, I had no idea what the hell would happen. Maybe the dome would repel the creature or, and this seemed more likely, the monster would wind up trapped inside the magical cage with me. That left me with only one plausible option. One really shitty option. Mind made up, I acted without another second of hesitation. As the creature raced toward me, I flipped onto my ass and lashed out with a brutal front kick, smashing my boot into one of the creature's bony kneecaps. This thing was legitimately horrifying in appearance, but it had all the muscle mass of an anorexic 6-year-old, plus it was tall and top-heavy, thanks to its many arms and the porcelain toilet perched atop its slender shoulders. My foot connected with a crunch, and the monster's knee bent in a direction knees aren't supposed to bend. The janitorial handyman let out a screech, equal parts pain and rage, as it lost its footing and toppled to one side. Its bulky toilet had crashed into the sink, busting it from the wall and damaging the connecting pipe in the process. There was a rumble and a hiss as a gush of water arced through the air and splashed onto the tile floor in a steady drizzle. Despite its injuries, the janitor quickly scrambled back to its hands and knees. Its wounded leg dragged along the floor, but that didn't seem to deter the monster too much. Thanks to all its extra arms, it was able to easily maneuver along the floor like some kind of human centipede. There was another sharp crack and its legs arced up behind it in a C, making the creature appear less like a centipede and more like a hell scorpion ripped out of a Hieronymus Bosch painting. The black toilet lid flipped up, and from this angle, I could see that there were 5 gleaming, insectal eyes set into the underside of the lid. The toilet bowl contained a bloody red throat, and the lip of the seat was ringed with curved, undulating teeth. The fleshy tongue poked over the edge and waggled back and forth in hungry anticipation. Every single thing about this was horrifying, and it had ruined one of my single favorite pastimes, sitting on the john while I scrolled on my phone. Assuming I survived the next 10 minutes, I was never gonna be able to look at the toilet the same way again. Instead of immediately advancing and pouncing on me like a feral hound, the janitor tilted forward, lowering the edge of the seat until it was nearly flush with the ground. It shook its toilet bowl mouth back and forth, disgorging several black slug-like creatures onto the floor. Each was about a foot long, completely eyeless, and had a circular, suction cup mouth ringed with even more teeth. Dweller 0.051D, Janitorial Toilet Snake Level 1, Great. Perfect. Just when I thought this place couldn't get any worse, it proved me wrong yet again. The trio of toilet snakes slithered toward me, leaving gooey slime trails in their wake. Even though my ribs ached and my head felt fuzzy, I fought my way to my feet. I bolted left and snatched up my hammer, then pocketed the slammer and pulled free my demolition screwdriver. I'd made it this far and I wasn't going to roll over and die for anything. Motivated by a potent cocktail of fear, disgust, and a primal urge to survive, I brought one boot down on top of the nearest toilet snake, popping it like an overripe tomato. Strings of white gore spurted out, sizzling against the tile. These things were filled with acid. That's just what I needed. Suppressing the violent urge to vomit, I turned and punted the second snake, knocking it across the room and into the mirror. The thing popped like a meaty water balloon on impact, dead before it could pose any real threat. The third, however, disappeared behind the padded chair. Not having eyes on the gross, slimy son of a bitch made me uneasy, but I had an even bigger threat to deal with. The janitor let out a gurgling bark and launched a blue spitball at me. I ducked on instinct, narrowly avoiding the loogie of death, which splattered all over the wall behind me with a terrible hiss. Instead of launching another ranged attack, the monster lunged for me, its prehensile tongue darting toward my throat like a striking cobra. I sidestepped the attack and batted aside the flailing tongue with my gloved hand before it could latch on. At the same time, I brought the hammer crashing into the side of the janitor's porcelain head, knocking the ugly son of a bitch to one side. The janitor skittered along on its many arms and hands, quickly regaining its balance. Before I could get some much-needed distance, it lurched sideways, slamming one bony shoulder into my chest. I staggered back, but a lanky arm shot out and snagged my ankle, jerking me off my feet for a second time. I landed on my back and my head bounced off the tiles, sending a jagged lance of pain into my skull. The fall knocked the wind from my lungs, and before I could even try to get a breath, the janitor was on top of me. Still wheezing and struggling for air, I jammed one foot into the creature's gut and pushed. It was stronger than it looked, but with my leg propped up between us, it couldn't give me the swirly to end all swirlies. I lashed out with the hammer, this time targeting one of its hands, still pressed against the floor. The blunt tool landed with a satisfying crunch as fingers snapped. The creature recoiled, giving me just enough space to slam the hammer into the creature's ribs once, twice, then a third time. It let out squeals of pain, but instead of falling back, it redoubled its efforts and threw itself at me with even greater fervor. It raked jagged fingernails across my chest. The attack sliced through my undershirt and left a trio of deep gouges in my skin. I flipped the hammer around with a growl and drove the pry claws into the monster's bony bicep. The claws punched through the papery thin skin and sent out a spurt of sludgy black blood. This time the creature retreated, but it tore the hammer from my grip in the process. The janitor regarded me for a long moment with its utterly alien, insectal eyes. I eyed him right back, trying to evaluate my chances of survival. This thing had expected an easy kill, but I'd made it bleed for its assumptions. A deep crack ran along the toilet tank, which leaked bloody fluid to the floor. Its pale ribs were now as black as fresh asphalt. One leg was still busted to hell, an arm dangled uselessly at its side, and one of its hands was little more than mangled pulp. I was in better shape, but not much. Gritting my teeth, I struggled back to my feet, using the tiled wall behind me for leverage. The creature let out a chittering sound, and a second later something heavy dropped onto my shoulders from above. The last of the toilet snakes, the one that had taken cover behind the padded chair before I could finish it off. A slimy tail wrapped around my right arm, then the little monster latched onto my pec with its flat, suction cup mouth. Razor-sharp teeth sawed down, and my exposed skin began to burn from the toilet snake's caustic saliva. With an inhuman roar, the janitor barreled straight into me, smashing a shoulder into my gut, doubling me over. Several pairs of unnaturally strong arms wrapped around me, lifting me off the floor and squeezing me tight in a deadly bear hug. While I struggled fruitlessly against the crushing limbs, the janitor's purple tongue wrapped around my throat, cutting off the already meager flow of oxygen heading for my lungs. Fingers of darkness were reaching in from the edges of my vision, and I knew I didn't have long. I still had the screwdriver in my hand. I angled the flat edge of the blade upward, then drove it into the monster's abdomen with my last ounce of strength. The screwdriver, designed for demolishing brick and stone, easily pierced skin and muscle, sinking all the way up to the handle. A gush of warm fluid washed over my glove, and the arm squeezing me to death eased just a hair. I gasped, pulling in another vital breath, then fumbled the utility knife from my tool belt with fingers that were going numb. I pushed the blade out with a thumb, then swiped up, slicing deep into the meaty tongue wrapped around my throat like a living noose. The monster squealed and stumbled backward on uncertain feet. I drove the utility knife into the flat, black head of the toilet snake, still clinging to my chest like an overgrown leech. Acidic blood spurted out and the creature dropped to the bathroom floor. One swift stomp splattered the slug beyond recovery. The janitor was staggering, its tongue whipping back and forth in a pained frenzy. Shattering its kneecap hadn't done shit, and it hardly even noticed its pulped hand, but its tongue. Its tongue was very sensitive, it seemed. My hammer was still hanging from the monster's arm and the screwdriver was planted in its guts, but luckily I had more weapons at my disposal. I drew out my speed square with the soft whisper of metal on leather. The speed square was actually a large triangular piece of steel with a smaller triangle cut out in the center of the tool. Every handyman, carpenter, or general contractor carried one since they were the best tool around for measuring, cutting, and determining angles on the fly. I had a different purpose in mind. I gripped the flat edge of the tool in my right hand, so the triangular edges were facing outward, transforming it into a makeshift, modern-day punch dagger. While the janitorial handyman stumbled around drunkenly, I grabbed its flailing tongue with my left hand and pulled the creature toward me while simultaneously driving the triangle into the creature's thin and frail throat. The speed square wasn't particularly sharp, but I rocketed the tip of the triangular tool through its esophagus anyway. Chapter 7 The blow forced the creature backward, its many arms pinwheeling to maintain its precarious balance. Still gripping the creature's tongue, I pulled my fist back and smashed the tool into the monster's throat again and again and again, until at last the edge of the square ripped messily through the monster's neck. The creature let out one last choking gurgle, then collapsed to the floor in a heap of limbs while sludgy black blood pooled around it. Its porcelain head lay to one side, connected to the rest of its body by a thin strand of white tissue no larger than my pinky. I scrambled away from the dead monster and collapsed against the far wall, my legs shaky and my whole body trembling from exertion. I dropped the speed square, covered in gore, and just sat there for a while, breathing heavily as I watched the corpse. All I wanted was a cigarette. That and a cold beer. I'd quit smoking 8 years ago, not long after getting out of the Corps. I still lit up the occasional cigar every now and then while drinking with my buddies, but I hadn't had the urge to smoke a cigarette in, well, I couldn't even remember how long. I wanted one now, though. Just something to help take the edge off and settle my understandably frayed nerves. I did more than my fair share of fistfights and I'd served in an active combat zone, but I'd never experienced anything like the battle against the janitor. It had been so close. So personal. So intense, violent, and visceral. Part of me wanted to pump one fist in the air, while another part wanted to throw up in the toilet. Well, maybe not this toilet, since the interior of the bowl looked like a miniature version of the Sarlacc pit, but a toilet. An icon appeared and when I hazarded a look toward it, a whole new batch of notifications and research achievements scrolled across my vision. Most of them were unimportant, throwaway first achievements. Baby's first massacre, for murdering more than 3 monsters during a single combat encounter, and murder was the word the achievement used, not kill. Napoleon Complex, for attacking and defeating a lobby guardian while being at effective level 0. Budding Explorer for discovering an active stairwell for the first time. Together, they netted me 5 more Copper Delver loot tokens, 1 Copper Medic token, and a Copper Slayer token. Killing the toilet snakes had earned me 25 experience each, and taking out the toilet-headed janitorial handyman brought in another 350. Combined with the additional 500 experience points I got as a reward from the Baby's First Massacre research achievement, it kicked me up another level, which, with a little bit of mental math, put me at level 5. Not that it made much of a difference at this point. I was starting to suspect that I couldn't actually gain those levels until I fully integrated with the virus upgrade interface, and to do that, I needed to find one of the progenitor monoliths the system kept jabbering on about. On top of the more generic achievements, I received a couple of more interesting achievements that came with a few higher-tier loot tokens and even a new title, Weapon of Opportunity. Research achievement unlocked. Barbarian of the Bathroom. Look at you go, you filthy fucking animal. You managed to kill a stairwell guardian without having a single relic equipped to your spatial core. You've displayed a unique blend of brawn and bowel control, which is as stupid as it is impressive. Instead of relying on the powerful sorceries of the backrooms, you embraced the raw might of your biceps, unleashing the fury of mediocrity and unwashed armpits. Your dedication to the art of close combat has earned you a place in the annals, or should it be annals? Of unconventional heroism. Reward, 1x Copper Brawler Loot Token. Research achievement unlocked. Weapon of Opportunity. Swords, battle axes, nunchucks, even automatic assault rifles. These are the tools of war. But you? You use actual tools. While others rely on deadly instruments of destruction, you choose to delve into the depths of your toolbox, transforming everyday objects into instruments of pain and fleshy ruin. That screwdriver? A kidney shive. The humble hammer? Nay, a war club capable of shattering bones with every swing. And who could forget the trusty old speed square, slicing through your enemies with geometric precision. Your ability to turn the mundane into the murderous is disturbing, but I've got a feeling you'll fit in just fine here. Reward, 1x Gold Weaponsmith Loot Token. Title, Weapon of Opportunity. Deal 5% additional physical damage when using a melee weapon that can also be classified as a tool. Like the level ups, I still couldn't do anything with the loot tokens I'd earned, but that would change eventually. The new research achievements weren't the only interesting things I found either. Although I had no desire whatsoever to approach the dead and gory body of the janitor, my screwdriver and hammer were still lodged firmly into its corpse. I pulled the hammer out of its arm without much effort, but the screwdriver was really jammed in there, so I had to get down on one knee and use my left hand to push against the creature's pale torso while yanking at the screwdriver handle with my other hand. When I touched the creature's chest, I noticed a strange warmth radiating outward from its otherwise clammy skin. As I focused on that warmth, a black rift appeared like a jagged gash along the janitor's chest, which quickly vomited out several items. Then the void rift shrank and vanished with a pop, and the warmth emanating from the janitor disappeared entirely. There were 4 items of note. I was already familiar with the first. It was another bottle of the Zima, though this one was a lesser healing elixir instead of a greater elixir like the one the gunslinger had gifted me. This time, the tagline read "Same great flavor, but now with half as much organ juice." The lesser elixir offered most of the same health and regenerative benefits, it just took significantly longer to repair any damage. I was pretty beat up from my scuffle with the janitor, so I briefly considered downing the potion, but eventually decided against it. I had no idea how rare these things were, and though I was injured, I wasn't in immediate mortal danger. I figured it was better to save the elixir for when the shit really hit the fan. The next item was a small black hexagonal piece of metal. There was nothing magic about it, but it was extremely valuable, nonetheless. I eyeballed the metal door, which led out into the stairwell beyond. If the janitor was the stairwell guardian, it made sense that it would have the key. This would save me loads of time, and it might work on other doors that had a similar design and locking mechanism. I slipped the bit of metal into my pocket and moved on to the next piece of loot, which turned out to be a glorious treasure beyond the scope of human comprehension or understanding. At a casual look it appeared to be a lowly, half-used roll of single-ply toilet paper. After a more thorough inspection, I discovered it was a lowly, half-used roll of single-ply toilet paper that never ran out. Ever. The roll of endless wipe. Common artifact. Type, reusable, cursed. Let me set the stage for you. There you are, knee-deep in the bowels of the backrooms, battling the unspeakable frog-themed horrors of the 32nd floor. Then, suddenly, nature calls. It's a shitty situation, but thankfully the roll of endless wipe has your ass covered. Each pull unfurls a seemingly inexhaustible supply of toilet paper. But be warned, for this stuff is a double-edged sword. It feels like you're wiping your butthole with sandpaper. It'll get the job done, but believe you me, you ain't gonna like it and you'll be working funny for days after. Despite the ominous warning about the quality of the toilet paper, I slipped it into my tool belt like a giddy kid on Christmas morning. As a contractor and former Marine, I'd survived countless porta-shitters, spanning the globe from Cincinnati to Iraq, so I knew well the dangers and challenges of cheap, single-ply toilet paper. Still, I'd much rather have this than nothing at all. The last item I received from the janitor was something I hadn't seen before. Something called a relic, which took the form of a clear cleaning spray bottle filled with some sort of mysterious blue liquid. The label on the front read Bleach Bolt, the patented unidentified stain and flesh eradicator. At first, I thought it was a weapon or an artifact like the slammer, but when I flipped over the bottle to examine the label on the back, an item description appeared, which quickly disabused me of the notion. Bleach Bolt, the unidentified stain eradicator. Uncommon relic, level 1. Range, single target. Cost, 5 mana. Unleash an orb of superheated, highly concentrated cleaning solution, so powerful it can clean the skin right off your enemy's bones in a matter of seconds, leaving their skeleton as bright and shiny as ever, at least until it dissolves that, too. Bleach Bolt's patented solution works best on organic compounds and is ineffective against inorganic substances such as metal, tile, or plastic, though it will leave them with a gleaming razzle-dazzle second to none. The target takes 15 points of corrosive burst damage on contact, plus 2 points of additional corrosive damage per minute for 5 minutes. This relic enables mana usage. The relic felt warm, almost comforting. Working on autopilot, my hands brought the item toward my chest, and as it touched my shirt, a clean black rift opened, unbidden, and the bottle of vaguely ominous cleaning solution disappeared inside my chest cavity. The rift snapped shut a second later, leaving no sign of the bottle behind. But I could feel it inside me, loitering in my soul. New knowledge bloomed inside my head like a flower unfurling its petals toward the sun. I stretched out one hand, palm up, and activated the new spell with a thought and a subtle effort of will. An orb of blistering hot blue goop exploded outward from my hand and splattered across the janitor's battered and emaciated corpse. This was the same substance that the janitor had spit at me during our tussle. As I watched the blue goo eat through skin and bone with alarming and brutal efficiency, I was suddenly very glad that I'd managed to avoid the attack. A blue bar appeared in the corner of my eye and drained almost immediately, leaving me feeling woozy, stumbling slightly, and lightheaded. Since I'd spent more than a few hours with my ass planted in front of a gaming console playing RPGs like Eva Doom and Titan Realm, I was guessing that was my mana bar. Seeing just how much mana the simple spell took told me my current mana level was abysmally bad. Sure, this was an uncommon spell, but it wasn't rare or legendary, so I probably should have been able to cast it more than once without feeling like I'd just finished running a marathon. Still, I smiled. I had magic. And not just any magic. Get fucked, burn your face off corrosive magic. Let those creepy, smiling lobby greeter shitheads take a shot at me now. I earned a research achievement for activating the spell for the first time, my first relic, though it didn't come with any extra benefits. Under reward it just said, face-melting magic as its own reward, so don't get greedy. While my mana ticked up in painfully slow increments, about a point a minute, I searched the 3 toilet snakes. One of them was so badly damaged that I couldn't even examine its corpse for items. That was good to know, and I logged that little detail away for later. Staying alive was obviously at the top of the priority list, but gathering materials and resources was just below that. Which meant I needed to kill things in a gentle enough manner that I could still loot their corpses. The other 2 each yielded a single common relic shard, which looked like small chunks of glossy white porcelain. Relic shard. Common. These bad boys are scattered all throughout the backrooms and are most commonly found on the corpses of lesser dwellers. But don't let their humble origins fool you. Combine 10 relic shards to randomly generate a relic of the same rarity level. You never know what you're gonna get, it's basically gambling, but that's the fun. Now that was interesting, as well. I'd gotten lucky in my fight against the janitor, and if any one of a dozen little things had gone differently, I would have been the one lying dead in a pool of my own fluids. Until I found a progenitor monolith, and got a few more levels and relics under my belt, it would be smart to avoid fighting something so obviously out of my weight class. But the toilet snakes? Killing those things had been relatively easy, though disgusting. If I could grind my way through some of the less powerful monsters, maybe I could cobble together enough shards to form a few more magical skills to help level the playing field. I stowed the 2 shards and took a few minutes to clean up while my mana gauge finished refilling. I peeled off the mechanic's gloves, then splashed water from the busted sink pipe along my hands, arms, and face. It was blessedly cool and refreshing against my skin. I took a couple of mouthfuls and swished it around, trying to get rid of the deadly post-hangover morning breath kicking around inside my mouth. It was a losing battle. Rinsing helped a little, though. There was a chance the water was toxic, but it tasted fine, and I wouldn't make it much longer before dehydration put me flat on my back with heatstroke. So, I threw caution to the wind, drank my fill, then filled up the empty Zima bottle. I tore off a huge weight of toilet paper from the roll of endless wipe, packed it into a tight ball, then jammed it into the opening. It wouldn't work well long term, but it was the best I could do for now. I took one last look around the bathroom of nightmares, muttered a prayer that things would get easier from here, then unlocked the door and headed into the stairwell, bound for the greener pastures below. At least, I hoped they were greener pastures and not a sewer of shit and misery. Chapter 8. The stairwell was nothing special and blessedly devoid of monsters or unnamed horrors waiting to devour me the moment I let my guard down. It was just plain concrete, a simple metal handrail, and a series of switchbacks that eventually led me to an industrial door with a narrow rectangular window and a metal bar running across the front, just like the one I'd left behind. A sign above the door read exit, but there was nothing to indicate where the stairwell would dump me. The door itself was locked, which wasn't a huge surprise, but luckily the janitor's key opened this one as well. Before blundering out, I peeked through the window, trying to get my bearings and see if there were any obvious dangers waiting for me. I'd worked at a lot of different construction sites over the past 9 years, some private, others commercial, and I knew a shopping mall when I saw one. This one looked years out of date, like something stuck, unchanged, in a time capsule since the 1980s. It was a sprawling, multi-level complex with tiled floors and broad salmon-colored columns rising up to a skyline I couldn't quite see through the narrow strip of safety glass. The place was painted with cool pastel colors, and vibrant, pink neon lighting ran along the edges of the railing on the upper floors. Hesitantly, I popped the door, shoving it open just enough to get a better look. Off to the left was an expansive open courtyard with a water fountain in the center surrounded by several planters, overgrown with strange-looking vegetation. Palm trees and creeping vines, thick ferns and huge red-spotted flowers, easily the size of a man. No tag appeared when I looked at them, but instinct told me those things were probably trouble. Best to steer clear. A pair of escalators in the courtyard ascended to the second floor, and above them was a triangular glass ceiling. It didn't look out onto the night sky. Instead, it peered out into nothing. Just endless black, devoid of life. At least, I hoped it was devoid of life. I had the distinct impression I didn't want to run into anything that might be swimming around in those dark waters. An eye-searing neon sign in shades of red, pink, and purple hung above the courtyard, declaring this place to be the Neon Junction Shopping Center. A darkened hallway stretched out beyond the planters and the courtyard, lined with shops I couldn't quite make out. To the right were more shops, running along the lower level of the mall. Although the mall itself was rather gloomy, the garish neon signs above the boutiques were on, casting the floors and walls in a kaleidoscope of dreamlike carnival colors. I'd never heard of any of the shops and everything about them was subtly wrong. Almost as though they'd been designed and fabricated by someone who'd been told at great length about shopping malls but had never actually seen one in real life. There was a place called Vinyl Vibes with a glossy black record dangling above the glass doors, decorated with concert posters for bands that didn't exist. The Atomic Riot, Wildfire Wailers, Thunderflash and Velvet Voltage. Beside the record store was the Glam Boutique, showcasing mannequins in dazzling sequin dresses and vibrant power suits with enormous, padded shoulders. Their tagline summed the shop up perfectly: glittering shadows, where dreams scream in neon. Across the way from them was an antique store, timeless vintage treasures, overflowing with lava lamps, leather bomber jackets, and plastic baubles of every shape and size. The only thing I really cared about, however, was nestled firmly between the antique store and a beauty shop called Big Hair Rising. A bank. Eastside City Savings and Loan. Perched just in front of the bank, waiting like a hunched-over gargoyle, was a clunky old-school ATM machine. Except, stenciled along the side of the gray box were the words Progenitor Monolith. Either this was phenomenal luck or a trap, just like the bathroom had been. The worst part was, I genuinely couldn't tell which. And even though it probably was a trap, I already knew I was going to roll the dice and hope for the best, which was asinine. Hope was a terrible plan. But what other option did I have? Taking one final look around, I pushed the door fully open and eased myself out into the retro shopping mall. I tore off a generous heap of toilet paper from the roll of endless wipe, then wadded it up and jammed it into the metal strike plate so the door couldn't properly latch. I tested my handiwork, silently pushing and pulling the door open and shut a few times to make sure I'd have a way out if this all went sideways. Satisfied that the door wasn't going to arbitrarily lock on me at the worst possible moment, I made my way along the center of the hallway, staying as far away from the storefronts as possible. In some ways, this was dumb because anyone out in the main corridors would be able to see me instantly, but I had a feeling that the real threats weren't out here. They were inside the stores themselves. I could have sworn the mannequins inside Glam moved to get a better look at me as I passed by. Finally, I stopped in front of the ATM/Progenitor Monolith, though I stayed a good 10 feet away. I crouched down and examined the machine at eye level, looking for anything odd or strange that might give it away as a trap. The problem was, everything about this place was odd and strange, from the stores to the halls, to the monstrous murder machines waiting to skin me alive. I licked my lips and rubbed at my jaw, warring with indecision. Finally, however, I stood and slowly approached. "Sorry to be a bother," a voice squeaked from a nearby pool of shadow. I froze, blood running cold, and whirled toward the voice. Without even thinking about it, my hammer leapt into my right hand while I prepared to launch a bleach bolt with my left. A creature stepped out from behind one of the overgrown planters back in the courtyard and moved toward me slowly. Deliberately. As if I were a skittish kitten that might bolt at any second. "I know, technically, it's none of my business," the thing said, "but I wouldn't do that if I were you." It spoke with a friendly, masculine voice and had a strange, clipped accent that was hard to place. Not Australia. New Zealand maybe? That wasn't important. What was important was that this thing was not human. Not even human-shaped. It looked like a medium-sized dog, except it was made entirely of blue croc material, a smooth, glossy surface with a rubbery texture dotted with large holes. As the creature approached, an identification tag flashed above its head. Dweller 0.377F, normal human dog. Level 7, they like to hide near stairwells, the mimics, the dog said. Though, again, it was a dog in the same way a flip-flop was a dog. Particularly stairwells that connect to the lobby. Easy to catch fresh meat that way. They can be quite tricky. Sneaky. The creature nodded its head toward the machine. They know the new delvers will be searching for one of the monoliths, so it's a good lure. This one isn't very smart, though. Not like the mimics you'll find on the lower levels. Those ones can talk. Think. Make deals, even. This one is young still. All just hunger and instinct. "That's plenty far enough," I said, raising my hammer in clear threat. The dog stopped, then sat on its haunches, its blue spotted tail waggling across the tile floor. I'm a lot less concerned about what that is. I hooked a thumb toward the ATM, and a lot more concerned about whatever in the hell you are. Sorry, but what do you mean? The dog asked quizzically. Didn't you see the tag? I'm a normal human dog. My designation is even marked F for friend. As in man's best friend. Yeah, I said, thing is, I'm a normal human and I've seen plenty of dogs. They don't talk. And they aren't made out of rubber. They also have fur and organs. I paused, trying to gauge its reaction. Now how's about you try that again before I splatter you with a bleach bolt? Aw fiddlesticks, the dog replied. Its tail ceased wagging and it lowered its muzzle. I really thought I had it this time. I looked up a picture of a dog in one of the stores upstairs, Paperbacks and Paradoxes. Lovely little place. Except for the bibliophages, nasty things, they are. Anyway, I found a kid's book called Totally Real Human Animals and this is what the dogs looked like. But most of the pro-generated materials in the back rooms can be a little wonky. Gee, you don't say, I replied flatly. Is that what you are? What all these monsters are? Pro-generated materials. In a way, the nut dog said. The levels are all pro-generated, of course. The stores and such as well. Technically everything that doesn't have material significance. But the dwellers are different. We're not materially produced via the influx processing and randomization system. Our distant ancestors were birthed by the God box on level 1000. Technically, for the sake of full transparency, it's called the progenitor cube, but we all just call it the God box. Also, I should amend that birthed probably isn't the right term either. More like we're thought into existence. It's a small, but nuanced difference. That means you're one of them, I said, not that there had ever been any doubt in my mind. It was a dog made of croc material. Like the janitorial handyman upstairs or those creepy lobby greeters. Yeah, the dog said dejectedly, but also no. It hunched up its shoulders in something resembling a shrug. We're not all bad. Our original purpose was as helpmates. But most of the dwellers lost their way. Forgot our purpose. I think it might have something to do with the blight. Now they just crave anything with even the faintest whiff of material significance. They want something that's real. Like that mimic there. It once again bobbed its head toward the ATM. What's your name? I asked, hoping to build a little bit of rapport with this thing. Never really thought about it, to be honest, the creature replied. And no one's ever bothered to give me one. You're a human, it stated with a hopeful edge in its voice. You lot are great at naming things. Why don't you give me a name? Its tail wagged and thumped energetically. I only had to think about it for a second before I said, Croc. Oh, that's a good name, the dog said, bobbing its head in agreement. Is this what it's like to have a friend? Because I quite like it. That depends, I said. Friends don't try to kill, eat, or dismember each other. So I guess the real question is, are you going to try to kill me, eat me, enslave my soul, or wear my skin like a fleshy jumpsuit? Not at all. I'm just trying to help, the dog replied. Admittedly, I haven't had the best of luck with the new arrivals. The last guy I tried to help was Tim. Seemed like a nice enough bloke, but he got scared when I introduced myself and then he ran headlong into the carnivore Rex, just over there. It bobbed its nose toward the overgrown foliage. Not sure what killed him first, the prolific bleeding or losing all his limbs at once. Croc paused. You know, now that I'm saying it out loud, it was probably the limb thing in retrospect. That didn't put my mind at ease. Well, since we're friends, Croc, I pressed, why don't you tell me what you really are? Maybe show me what you look like beneath the dog suit. Yeah, not sure that's the best idea, Croc replied uncertainly. The guy before Tim, his name was Matthew, didn't take it so well. Ended up falling face first into the acid pool, then the reflection lurker ate him. Which reminds me, under no circumstances should you try to drink out of the water fountain. It's acid, and there is an enormous invisible fish that will 100% eat you. Friends trust each other, Croc, I said, still gripping my hammer so tightly it hurt. If you want me to trust you, I need to know what I'm dealing with. The dog sighed then nodded. Yeah, that's what Matthew said too, it mumbled half-heartedly under its breath. Then, without any further warning, its form bubbled and shifted. Chapter 9. In a matter of seconds, the croc dog was gone, and a blob of bright blue goop appeared in its place. The creature had a small army of writhing tentacles, several different mouth orifices, all filled with far too many jagged teeth, and eyes. So many eyes. It almost reminded me of the weird, blooded cloak that the flayed monarch had worn. The tag above the creature's head shimmered and changed, this time reading, Dweller 0.3778, Juvenile Polymorphic Mimic Outcast, Level 7. I raised one hand and actively suppressed the urge to throw up in my mouth. I can make a lot of different shapes, if this one bothers you. Croc offered helpfully, voice echoing out of at least 7 different mouth holes simultaneously. Here is a chair. Its tentacles retracted and its body stretched and morphed, turning into a formidable wingback chair with padded armrests. There were blank eyes and a wide flat mouth set into the backrest. I've also been working on my very human appearance as well. To blend in, and such. Croc shimmered again, and this time assumed a human-shaped being. Except it looked boneless, almost as if it were made of Play-Doh. It was maggot white, wore no clothes, was completely androgynous, with a smooth Ken doll crotch, and had a face without a nose but a very large and unnerving smile. I can blend my shapes, too, in case you want a little bit of A and a little bit of B, the utterly inhuman-looking creature said. Here is a dog-human hybrid. Its shape blurred again, and a blue humanoid creature with overly long arms, an enormous wolf muzzle, and a pair of unblinking yellow eyes the size of tennis balls stared at me. I shuddered in revulsion. The unholy monstrosity before me reminded me of a furry. My one true fear in the whole world. It wasn't that I had a sort of personal hatred toward furries per se, as long as everyone is a consenting human adult, I have zero shits to give about how people live their lives. With that said, I had an irrational and deep-seated phobia of the walking, talking anthropomorphic furballs. Again, it wasn't a moral judgment, but furries managed to fall into uncanny valley territory, which triggered the reptilian, survival mechanism within my brain. Thankfully, the only time I ever saw them was at the occasional Comic-Con, and I always managed to keep a safe distance. Yeah, you know what? I said. That is much worse. Way worse. Why don't you just go back to the normal human dog? Good choice, the creature said, shrinking back down into a retriever made from blue croc material. This form is a bit more approachable, I find. Just for the sake of argument, I said slowly, eyes narrowing in suspicion, how do I know you're telling the truth? About the progenitor monolith, I mean. Well, Croc said, a good rule of thumb around here is to assume that everything, everywhere, all the time is both lying to you and trying to murder you. So, let me just say that your initial distrust is a great step in the right direction. Your survival prospects have already improved. Still, for the sake of argument, if I really wanted you dead, I could have just not said anything and let the monolith mimic eat you. If you don't believe me, you can always blast it with a spell. See for yourself. I hesitated for a beat. My primary spell only works on organic matter, I replied. Won't do anything against plastic or metal. Believe you me, Croc barked, that thing is entirely organic. The basic mimics on the lower levels can't actually transmogrify into things like metal, they can only look the part. If I preemptively attack, won't it fight back? I asked. Probably, Croc offered cheerily, but they aren't very strong. Low-level mimics are ambush predators, mostly. They can deal a tremendous amount of damage, but they have pitiful health. I glanced between the dog that wasn't a dog and the ATM that may or may not have been an ATM. I wasn't sure what the angle here was, maybe Croc was trying to get me to waste my spell on the ATM, then it would attack. Or maybe it was actually being helpful. Although we're building a good foundation for a relationship, I said, I'm warning you now. One wrong move and I'll sharp-roil your ass with a flamethrower spell. That was a lie, but the dog didn't know what I was capable of. I swear to God I will. I picked up a powerful artifact in the lobby and I won't hesitate to use it. I stowed the hammer and pulled the slammer out of my pocket, flashing it at the dog briefly. Not long enough for the creature to see what exactly I had, but just long enough for him to know I had something. I figured that if Croc did charge, I could always activate the slammer and shield myself long enough to come up with a better plan. Maybe even escape back into the stairwell with a little bit of luck. Keeping one eye on Croc, I raised my left hand, took aim at the allegedly knockoff progenitor monolith, and let loose an orb of superheated, highly corrosive super bleach. The blue ball of congealed death splattered against the front of the machine and started to hiss as fingers of acrid smoke drifted up. The machine immediately split in half, and a huge ravenous mouth appeared directly in its center. Curved yellow teeth gnashed madly, and a purple tongue flapped as the creature screeched in rage. The whole machine rose on a pair of spindly legs and charged, its mouth snapping open and closed as it ran. I dropped the slammer onto the floor beside me and shouted the activation phrase, still feeling like a complete mook as I did. "Let's pog." The golden birdcage formed, and the timer popped up in the corner of my eye. The snarling would-be ATM collided with a dome of light and rebounded off as though it had just run face first into a brick wall. It stumbled, trying to regain its balance, then pitched over and landed with a meaty thud. The corrosive bleach bolt was still going to town, mercilessly eating through its skin and muscle. It just lay there mewling and whimpering pathetically, its legs weakly pedaling in the air like a turtle that had been flipped over onto its shell. This thing was a monster, but watching as it struggled and suffered, well, I almost felt bad. Just like with the others, a tag appeared when I examined the monster a little more closely. Dweller 0.372C. Juvenile monomorphic flytrap mimic level 2. So, this thing was a mimic, just like the talking dog, though obviously there were some significant differences between the two. The most important difference was that the talking dog had probably just saved my life. That still didn't mean I could trust it, or him. I wasn't quite sure which was the right term, since this could all be some sort of long con to get me to drop my guard. Except the mimic dog was level 7. The janitorial handyman I'd fought in the bathroom had been a level 3 and I'd barely walked away with my life. True, I had the bleach bolt now, but I had a feeling that if that goofy-looking mutt wanted to kill me, it probably could without too much of a headache. I pushed it to the back of my mind, bent over, picked up my slammer, and deactivated the spell with a few words. I'd burned through 12 seconds of spell time. I slipped the coin back into my pocket and waited for the struggling mimic to right itself and charge again. It didn't. "You're lucky," the dog called in its oddly chipper voice. "This one's still young. Only has the one form. Plus, mimics tend to be extremely vulnerable against corrosive damage or poison spells. Little guy's probably only a few weeks old. There must have been a hatching not too long ago." I stored that info away for later and readied my hammer. My mono gauge was recovering, but it would take a few minutes before I could launch another bleach bolt, and I had no desire to stand here and watch this thing die slowly and painfully. Obviously, it was a monster, but it didn't seem particularly evil or malicious. It was just a predator. An animal. Even animals deserve to have a quick, clean death. I circled to the right, steering clear of its thrashing legs and lashing tongue, then angled inward toward the top of its head. Or what passed for a head, I guess. The creature let out some disheartening screeches and redoubled its efforts to murder me, but it was on its last legs, metaphorically speaking, of course. In the most literal sense, it was on no legs. Hardening my resolve, I brought the hammer roaring down, burying the head into what looked like melted plastic and metal, but what felt like pulpy meat. I kept swinging until the mimic stopped twitching and its anguished cries guttered and finally fell silent. My hammer was covered in a sludgy golden ichor, and I used a bit of toilet paper to wipe it clean before slipping it back into my tool belt. The mimic's death had earned me 100 experience points and a new achievement. "You're so basic." Research achievement unlocked. "You're so basic." You're a basic bitch in the most literal sense of the phrase. melting your enemies with a chemical cocktail more commonly found in the cleaning aisle than on the front line of a battlefield. But just because something's basic doesn't mean it's bad. Starbucks keeps the old pumpkin spice around for a reason, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Slay Queen. Reward, 1x Silver Elementalist Loot Token. On top of the modest experience and the extra achievement, when I looted the Mimic's corpse, I also found my second relic, which took the form of a folding makeup compact with a small mirror inside. Instead of the typical color palette, this had makeup in hues of black and green, brown and tan. It was a camo face painting kit. I'd had something similar during my time in the Corps, though I'd only ever used it in boot camp. Not much need for forest face paint in the desert. Basic camo kit, camouflage spell. Common relic, level 1. Range, single target. Cost, 2 mana. Duration, 1 minute. The ultimate spell for those intrepid delvers who aspire to be just a smidgen harder to spot in the realm of mayhem and chaos. You 100% will not be invisible, but by casting this basic camo kit camouflage spell you'll achieve the unparalleled feat of blending into the background. A little bit. For the duration of the spell, you'll go from immediately noticeable to moderately overlooked in the blink of an eye. This relic enables mana usage. I finished reading over the description, then dismissed the prompt and immediately pressed the stupid-looking camo makeup compact into my chest. There was a flare of heat as the relic melted through my clothes and disappeared inside the black void that was my spatial core. It was only a common spell, and the description made it sound rather underwhelming, but it only cost 2 mana to use, and it had a decent duration. Even if it made me only slightly more difficult to see, that might well save my ass down the road. I wondered if there was some way to level up the spell itself. It was listed as level 1 in the item description, which implied that it could potentially go higher. Maybe if I leveled the spell up enough, it would genuinely render me invisible, or the next best thing. I didn't have an answer to that question, but I knew who might be able to tell me. I glanced at the rubbery croc dog, who was still keeping a respectful distance, its tail wagging enthusiastically. "Don't suppose you know how these relics work?" I asked. "Of course," it said, sounding happy to be of use. "I mean, I'm not an expert or anything, but all the dwellers know the essentials. We're the source of the relics, after all." "What do you mean the dwellers are the source of the relics?" I asked. "They come from us," Croc replied. "Inside us, I mean." It tapped a paw against its chest. "Like I said, we're thought manifestations, born from the God Box. The God Box is the source of all magic in the backrooms, and each of us is invested with a little piece of its power. That's what the shards are. But as we evolve and advance, the shards grow until they eventually transform into a relic. Most of the dwellers on the early levels only have one relic or a couple of common shards, but the more powerful dwellers on the lower floors sometimes have half a dozen or more. There was a lot to unpack there, and at this point I still wasn't sure that I could trust Croc. Worse, even if I could trust the nut dog, I wasn't even sure which questions to ask. There was just so much I didn't understand about this place. "Let's put a pin in all that for now," I said after a beat. "What about these progenitor monolith things I keep hearing about? Could you take me to one?" "A real one," I amended, stealing a sidelong look at the dead mimic on the floor. The dog paused, wiggling its nose. "Yeah, I suppose I could help with that. The closest one is in the next sector over, but I could get us there." It faltered for a thin minute. "Might be a bit touch and go since we'll have to get past the black-light wisps, but I think we'll be alright with just a little bit of good luck." The dog turned and padded away. Hoping for good luck was also a terrible plan, but standing around here twiddling my thumbs wasn't any better. With no better options, and a fair bit of skepticism, I followed the dog deeper into the mall. Chapter 10. We headed away from the courtyard with the acidic water feature and the presumably carnivorous plants and to another intersection dotted with abandoned kiosks, which sold everything from candy and cheap plastic knickknacks to pungent-smelling facial creams and electric foot massagers. When I suggested that we loot them, Croc just chuckled and shook his rubbery head. "Classic rookie mistake," it said. Are there some top-tier prizes to be taken? Of course. But you'll never survive long enough to get 'em. It chortled in amusement. Everyone knows the kiosks are all rigged. Touch any of the items or even show too much interest and you'll accidentally summon one of the sales sirens. They are the perfect blend of metal and flesh, forged into the unstoppable selling machine. And by selling, I mean murder. Croc bobbed its head toward a set of wooden storage doors beneath the kiosk. Every kiosk has a set of those. They connect to a series of tunnels and underground caverns that link all the kiosks together, which is controlled by a single entity known as the franchisor. The sales sirens themselves appear human, and though they're rather weak, physically, you won't find one lower than a level 5. Croc paused and glanced over one shoulder at me. They have some truly insidious psychic abilities. You wouldn't stand a chance, especially with a grit score under 15. What's a grit score? I asked, edging a little further away from one of the kiosks. Oh, don't worry about that too much, Croc replied. You'll learn all about the various virus stats once you finish integrating. Grit's sort of like willpower, I suppose. It measures your mental determination and your ability to resist sonic attacks and psychic influences. You need to have a high grit to go up against the sirens. A while back, I was working with a delver from Germany, a fella named Fritz. Headstrong, overconfident, wouldn't listen to me. He tried to take on a siren working at one of the hand cream booths with only a 7 in grit. Long story short, the hand cream was sentient and ended up crawling into Fritz's lungs and then laying thousands of eggs inside his torso. Very messy. I gotta be honest, I said, I find it a little off-putting that so many of the people you try to help wind up dead under some very horrific circumstances. Croc had no answer for that. We ended up skirting the majority of the kiosks entirely by taking a narrow hallway with slate-gray floors and beige walls, which led to the restrooms. Not that there was actually a restroom. Just an abundance of signs for them. While we walked along a winding, disorienting set of identical corridors, I picked Croc's brain about the relics. There were 1,000 things I wanted to know about the backrooms and how they functioned. What the hell were the backrooms? How the hell had I gotten here? How the hell did I get out? But right now the relics were the most important item on the list. They were the tools that would enable me to survive long enough to get those other questions answered. There are 5 different relic ranks, Croc explained, talking to me like I was a plucky 3rd grader. Common, uncommon, rare, fabled, and mythic. The same ranking system also holds true for artifacts. The rarity level is assigned based on how frequently that spell or ability is spawned by the god box amongst the dwellers. Common through rare relics occur naturally, though snagging a rare relic above floor 25 is quite unlikely. Unless you kill a powerful overseer or clear a blight-infected area. What about fabled and mythic? I asked, constantly scanning the barren halls for any sign of threat. Yeah, those are a bit different, Croc replied. If you're very lucky and you don't die, you might be able to find a fabled relic below floor 100. Though, and I can't stress this enough, no one, ever, under any circumstances, should venture that deep. As for mythic relics, they are myths just like the name implies. Could be the Flayed Monarch as one, but I've never heard of any normal delver finding one. Casual mention of the skinless horror sent a wave of goosebumps racing along my arms. But I kept my mouth firmly shut. I was a new delver, still officially at level 0, with no legitimate reason whatsoever to even know who or what the Flayed Monarch was. I was starting to trust Croc a little, but I didn't want to give anything away at this point. It was unlikely, but what if Croc was one of the Monarch's aspirants? Would the mimic dog immediately attempt to kill me once it knew I was in the crosshairs of the skinless court? I didn't know and I didn't particularly want to find out. Certainly not until I'd visited one of the monoliths and fully integrated my new abilities. See, the thing about fabled and mythic relics is that they don't occur naturally, Croc continued without missing a beat. Not like the artifacts do. Fabled and mythic relics must be forged by combining several lower-tier relics with synergistic effects into a single, higher-tier relic with a more specific or powerful effect. Thing is, Combining relics is very touch and go. It can be quite random, and there's no telling what skill, spell, or ability will be generated. Combining a bunch of synergistic rares to generate a fabled relic is just... well, it's mad, isn't it? Instead of having 3 powerful rare abilities, you might end up with a single fabled ability with a power so specific and focused that it's as good as useless. Who would do something like that? My mind immediately jumped back to the battle I'd witnessed between the time-worn gunslinger and the flayed monarch. Living deities would do something like that. Now that I was starting to get a sense of how magic worked in this place, it was obvious to me that each of the 2 warriors must have had countless artifacts and any number of insane and powerful relics. Each had cast spell after spell, harnessing the forces of nature as though it were child's play. I was betting every relic they had was likely fabled or mythic. Clearly, those 2 were the type of creatures that inhabited the lower floors, and I happened to know the flayed monarch was actively gunning for me. I'd been marked for death for a reason. If I wanted to survive long enough to find a way out of this nightmarish hellhole, I was going to need to gamble big and pick up a few fabled and mythic relics of my own. Thinking about that drew my thoughts to the brass compass tucked away in my tool belt. The encrypted item that had fallen out of the monarch's spatial core. What about emblems? I asked offhandedly, absently running my index finger along the cool metal. Croc snorted. Not even sure where you heard about emblems, but you don't need to worry about finding one of those. It came up in one of the prompts, I lied. Let's just say, hypothetically, I was to find one. What do they do? Croc shrugged. Hypothetically, emblems function the same as relics, they are just better in every conceivable way. Relics are powerful items, but there's a catch. You can swap out individual relics at will, but you can only ever have 10 active relics equipped to your spatial core at any given point, and that's just as true for dwellers as it is for delvers, by the way. The reason why emblems are so powerful is because they break that rule. Or bend it, anyway. I told you that fabled and mythic relics are forged by combining several relics with synergistic effects into a single, higher-tier relic, right? It's the same with emblems. They aren't spawned, they are forged. Created. But making one is difficult because the material requirements are insane. You need at least 5 rare relics which have already been fully tempered, meaning they cannot be forged any further, and they all need to have a synergistic affinity for one another. I shook my head. It sounds like you're talking in cursive right now. Can you break it down shotgun style for me? Croc mulled it over for a second. To make an emblem you take 5 extremely rare and powerful relics, all with a related purpose, then fuse them together into a single set item. That item is an emblem. And why would someone want to do that? I asked. Because, Croc said, all the core abilities and spells of an emblem remain intact, but they can be equipped to your spatial core while only taking up a single relic slot. The explanation clicked into place like a puzzle piece. If I understood correctly, emblems were less like individual abilities and more like a class, which came with a bunch of different pre-selected abilities and spells. And I had one sitting in my tool belt. One that had presumably come directly from the spatial core of a demigod. I still didn't know what the compass of the catacomber did, but that only motivated me to find a monolith even quicker. Sounds confusing, I replied, pulling my hand away from the brass compass. Good thing I probably won't live long enough to ever see one. Now that's the spirit, Croc replied, waggling his tail. What about the relic levels? I asked. My Bleach Bolt is currently listed as a level 1 spell. Can I level it up through use? Like when I get experience points? Croc chuckled and shook his head. That would certainly make things easier, but sadly it doesn't work that way. The researcher equips you delvers with the virus, which allows you to channel the mana flowing through the backrooms. Unfortunately, the relics are like the dwellers themselves, they are manifestations of thought from the God box. Although many are activated by mana, they are distinct constructs. If you want to level a specific relic, you'll need to cannibalize the generative energy bound inside other relics. You can sacrifice 5 relics to raise the level of any single relic by 1 level. Once a relic hits level 5, It will undergo a qualitative shift and will change in some fundamental way. The effect will become more powerful, perhaps. Or maybe you'll be able to cast it on additional targets. Sometimes the cost will drop. Hard to say what will happen, but it'll be good. Once a relic reaches level 5, the cost to advance it further increases twofold. You'll need to sacrifice 10 relics to raise it each additional level. Once a relic hits level 10, it'll undergo another shift, and after that, it'll cost 20 sacrifices to raise it each subsequent level. I whistled through my teeth. Doing a little quick and dirty mental math, I realized I'd have to sacrifice 170 different relics to raise just one single relic from level 1 to level 15. Accumulating so many magical treasures sounded like a costly and dangerous process. What happens if I were to raise the level of a specific relic then forge it with another relic? Would I just lose all the levels I'd built up? No, Croc replied, shaking its rubbery head. The total number of levels from both relics would be averaged, rounding down. If you combine a level 5 relic and a level 1 relic, you'd wind up with a new relic that starts off at level 3. There is one important thing to point out about levels, though. When you kill a dweller and harvest a relic, it will always start out as level 1, but the same isn't true for you delvers. If you die, all of your relics retain their levels. Wait, I started to say, but wouldn't that incentivize merciless, bloodthirsty gangs of roving delvers who hunt other delvers in order to harvest their relics? Croc finished before I could get the words out of my mouth. Yep, I said flatly, already guessing at the answer. Yeah, sadly we have loads of those, Croc replied with a heavy sigh. The restless bones usually operate between floors 4 and 9. The Sisterhood of Smiles are holed up on 12. No telling where the children of the vault will show up, terrifying little buggers. And those are just the warbans I can think of off the top of my head. Here on level 3, we need to worry about the Reapers and Hudson's Red Hands. They're part of the reason we're going to cut through Barry's Blacklight Emporium. The Wisps are dangerous but not nearly as dangerous as either of those two outfits. Wait, we're on floor 3? I asked, suddenly disoriented. That can't be right. I ran a hand through my hair while my mind turned over the puzzle. I came down from the lobby, which, if I even remotely understand the layout of this place, is floor 0. That's an easy mistake to make, especially if you're new, Croc said matter-of-factly. You're right that the lobby is considered floor 0, but the thing about the backrooms is that time, space, and reality all work differently here than they do in the real world. This place exists in its own reality called superspace. Most people think of the backrooms like a big cube. A box with the floors stacked on top of each other, all nice and neat like the layers of a cake. But it isn't. It's a jumble. A mix-up. Most of the stairwells on any given floor will likely connect to an adjacent floor above or below, but sometimes not. Sometimes you skip a floor or two. Sometimes you skip a floor or 24. Believe me when I say, you do not want to accidentally stumble down one of the latter. That's a good way to get dead. Croc paused and turned, doubling back down a corridor we'd already passed through. Ah, here we are at last, it said, stopping in front of a gray metal door that hadn't been there 20 seconds ago. There was a paper sign taped to the wall with the words "Shortcut to Mall Shops" in big red letters. It could have been Sharpie, but the way the paper crinkled made me think it was probably something else. Like dried blood. On the door itself was a brown placard with the words Level 3, I-420, Barry's Blacklight Emporium. Chapter 11 Barry's Blacklight Emporium turned out to be a head shop. Like everything else inside the backrooms, however, Barry's was a TV stereotype cranked to 11, hit with a potent dose of psychedelic mushrooms, then vomited out by a sentient 3D printer. Bead curtains separated the doorways, eye-jarring tie-dye shirts and flags covered the walls, and there were several posters rendered in Rastafarian green, yellow, and reds with a man who almost looked like Bob Marley but wasn't. More like a version of Bob Marley sketched from memory by an amateur artist who was drunk. The words "One Love, One Heart, One Burrito. Let's Get Spicy" appeared below the man's picture. Along one wall was a long glass case filled with even more glassware. Hookah pipes with octopus-like hoses. Bongs the size of my leg in a riot of colorful hues. Neat rows of smaller pipes and weird, clear glass rigs that looked like they belonged in a chemistry lab. I examined several in passing. Most did nothing at all and had no description, while one item, an enchanted dab rig called the Blazer, could be used to increase the potency of certain alchemic elixirs and potions. I was curious about how artifacts worked and why some things seemed to be magic while others weren't, but now wasn't the time or place to ask Croc about it. Not while we were elbow deep in hostile territory. I'd only smoked pot once or twice in high school. It had never really held the same appeal as good old-fashioned liquor, but I was still tempted to snatch the enchanted Blazer on principle. Not because I had any inclination to get high, but because I figured something like that might come in handy later on. And if not, maybe I could sell it. If there were gangs and safe havens, then it stood to reason that there was some sort of economy here too. Trade was as old as humanity, and before the advent of modern-day fiat currency, barter had been the law of the land. I figured something like that Blazer could probably get me 3 hots and a cot for a day. Still, I resisted the impulse and kept my sticky fingers to myself, not wanting to trigger some sort of hookah horror that would undoubtedly attempt to strangle me to death or poison me with toxic clouds, or God only knew what else. Not that we made it clear of Barry's without incident. We were closing in on the front entryway, which would dump us back into the mall proper, when we wandered a little too closely to a bunch of tacky blacklight posters. There was an orange and red flaming skull with 8 balls for eyes. A psychedelic unicorn with a shimmering white coat and a flowing mane and tail that shifted between shades of pink and blue and purple. The cosmic dragon, with a huge serpentine body that appeared to be breathing out smaller dragons from its mouth, was my personal favorite. A close second was the groovy gargoyle, a stone behemoth wearing oversized sunglasses, one of its clawed hands held up in a peace sign. There were a handful more just like that. Electric octopus. Technicolor T-Rex. A giant, golden phoenix that rightfully belonged on the hood of a single .73 Trans Am. Others, which were even more ridiculous. They were all loud and obnoxious, but nothing more than gaudy eyesores. At least until the images started to bleed off the posters, circling around us in a kaleidoscope of shifting colors that left me feeling dizzy and a little stoned. These were the blacklight wisps Croc had warned me about. They were enchanting creatures of light and illusion that could bewitch the senses and enthrall the feeble-minded. Thankfully, they were all level 1 second and 2 seconds, with a single level 3 presiding over the whole bunch, the cosmic dragon, breathing smaller dragons, because of course it was that one. Thankfully the wisps were relatively harmless on their own. They were impervious to any sort of physical attack, and though they had some slight sonic ability, their real job was to confuse, disorient, and drive intruders deeper into the shop, where the nastier things that lurked in the glassware section waited to strike. Thankfully, Croc knew the score, and though I couldn't harm the fanciful lights directly, destroying their velvety posters did the trick. Killing them all took a lot longer than I wanted, and by the time I was done, I had a pounding headache that felt like the worst hangover of my life. Even worse than my hangover from Nico's bachelor party. That was the result of several concentrated sonic attacks. The wisps weren't all that powerful individually, but their attacks stacked over time. With so many of the wisps working against me, I could hardly see straight by the time the battle was done with. It was worth the headache, though. The level 1 second each granted me 20 experience points, while the level 2 seconds netted me 50 apiece. The level 3 Cosmic Dragon was worth 125, bringing the grand total up to 395 experience for the encounter. Additionally, I earned 6 more common shards, 1 from each of the level 1 wisps, and a small treasure trove of relics. I ended up with 3 identical common relics, all called tinfoil hat of mind shielding. The relics resembled a tinfoil hat, as the name implied, and each came with a passive ability that raised my grit by 1 point and offered me a 2% resistance against all forms of hypnotic sonics, which was any type of psychic attack that could unduly influence the mind or the physical senses. I tried to equip all 3 hats at once, hoping to stack the effect into a much larger bonus, but whatever laws governed the backrooms prevented me from cutting corners and breaking rules. Finally, I decided to leave one tinfoil hat of mind shielding equipped to my spatial core and stowed the other 2 in my tool belt. Maybe I could trade them at some point. That or sacrifice them to level up my bleach bolt spell. I picked up one final item from the level 3 blacklight wisp. It was an uncommon relic, which took the form of a ridiculous tie-dye lava lamp. Psychedelic light show of minor distraction. Uncommon relic, level 1. Range, line of sight. Cost, 2-16 mana. Duration, 15 seconds. Psychedelic light show of minor distraction allows you to conjure between 1 and 8 blacklight pixie dragons that will swirl through the air in a whirlwind of enchanting technicolor brilliance. Like a planetarium laser show, they'll create a hypnotic dance of light that will distract your enemies, giving you the upper hand in combat for a second or 2. There's also a tiny chance the dancing dragons will hypnotize any enemy onlookers, making them even more susceptible to your attacks. It's like staring at the sun. You know it's not good for you, but sometimes you just can't look away. The more dragons you summon, the greater the likelihood of triggering the hypnotic effect. This relic enables mana usage. Although it didn't do any damage, it was still a powerful spell and one with a ton of potential uses. I immediately equipped it to my core and conjured a pair of twin dragons. Each was about 2 feet long with a wingless, serpentine body. My blue mana gauge immediately dropped to 0. It seems that with my current mana supply, I could only summon 2 of the creatures before I ran dry. The dragons themselves were graceful creatures that dived and twirled through elaborate loops and patterns, opening their mouths and shooting out sprays of beautiful, multicolored sparks. I wasn't sure how much these things would help in combat, especially since it would cost most of my mana to cast the spell, but it would make a great party trick if I ever found a bar. The real prize, however, wasn't the experience, the shards, the relic, or anything that lay inside Barry's Blacklight Emporium. It was what was just outside the front doors. A progenitor monolith. This time a real one that wouldn't try to bite my face off. The slate-gray progenitor monolith looked exactly like the Hull King, old-school ATM, which had been sitting outside of the East Side City Savings and Loan Shop. Curiously, this one was also positioned in front of a fictional bank I'd never heard of called Fairview Heights Community Bank. I didn't have enough evidence yet to say it was a pattern, but it certainly didn't seem like a coincidence. Although Croc assured me that this monolith was legit and wouldn't try to turn me into a midday snack, I lobbed a ball of super bleach at it anyway. Just for good measure. The blob of blue goop splashed against the side of the boxy machine, then slid down, doing no damage but leaving an especially shiny streak of gray plastic in its wake. The stuff really did work miracles on dirty surfaces. "See, I told you this one was the real deal," Croc said, though there was no malice in the words. The mimic dog was just friendly and helpful. In a place where everything wanted to murder and eat you, friendly and helpful were somehow even more suspicious. But so far, Croc had been an open book and hadn't done anything to make me worry about its intentions. Just following the first rule, I replied over one shoulder, keeping my eyes trained on the monolith. Assume that everything, everywhere, all the time is both lying to you and trying to kill you. "Hey, that's what I said," Croc replied happily. "You listened. No one's ever listened before. There was this one Delver, Meadow, who said she was listening, but then she wandered into the ball pit inside animatronic adventure arcade against my express advice. The ball gremlins ate her from the waist down. Such a shame." I grimaced, and this time, I did look back at him. "Croc, just how many Delvers have you tried to help?" The mimic sat back on its haunches, tail waggling, doggy face screwed up and a thoughtful expression. That was hard to do since Croc didn't have eyes. "Time is funny here," Croc replied after a few moments, "and I've been here a long time. Several decades, I'd say. Hard to keep track of all the Delvers that have passed through during that time." "I don't need an exact number," I said. "Just, sort of ballpark for me." "Well, I'd say somewhere north of 300 then. And they're all dead? I choked out. The backrooms are a very dangerous place, Croc confided, as though that should be entirely self-evident, and he couldn't possibly be to blame. Plus, bear in mind, I've made it my mission to help brand new delvers, who are the most likely ones to die. I can think of 20 or so who made it past a week and a handful that survived a month. In my experience, it's best not to think about the numbers. It can be a teensy bit depressing. But I'm sure you'll be different. You remind me of Caroline, a real fighter. Lots of pep and spunk. What happened to Caroline? I asked, knowing I probably didn't want to hear the answer. Croc's expression faltered and his eyeholes drooped a little. Disavowed by a fitting room miracle inside the bargain bazaar on the 8th floor. Very tragic. That's encouraging, I said, mind already calculating how boned I was. Based on everything I knew so far, the answer was very. Except, I had one thing none of those other poor schmucks did. I ran my fingers over the brass compass. I had an emblem, stolen from one of the most powerful residents of the backrooms. That had to count for something, assuming I could figure out how to use it. I looked at Croc, who still looked rather dejected. Can you add eyes? I asked on a whim. It's hard to tell what you're thinking without eyes. Yes. Croc replied enthusiastically, its moment of melancholy suddenly forgotten. That is definitely something within my wheelhouse. The blue Croc dog shook its head, once then twice. When it stopped moving, it had an oversized pair of plastic googly eyes, resting above its doggy snout. Is that better? More relatable and friendly? I snorted and nodded. Yeah, it's perfect, I said, actually feeling a little bit better. Exactly what I had in mind. The compliment set the dog's tail to waggling so hard I thought it might take flight. With a half smile on my face, I closed the gap to the monolith in 3 long strides. Here goes nothing, I muttered, slapping my hand against the machine. Chapter 12. I heard the sharp whirl of a motor start up as digital text flickered to life on a small screen. Welcome to the backrooms. To access your personal virus account, please place your bare hand on the palm reader, then select an option from the menu. There was a blue square light on the gray plastic console with the green outline of a handprint emblazoned on the surface. The green handprint blinked on and off at me like a winking eye. Reluctantly, I peeled off one of my mechanic's gloves, shoved it into my tool belt, then complied. The scanner was warm against my skin and thrummed with faint energy. New words blinked onto the screen. New user detected. Initializing account setup and virus integration process. Please be patient, this will only take a few moments. Rest assured, any discomfort you feel is totally normal. Please note, side effects may include heart eruption, brain implosion, limb disfiguration, and catastrophic central nervous system failure. The Variant Research Division is not financially or legally culpable for any damage suffered while using the progenitor monolith. Before I could even finish reading all the fine print, the motor whirled even more loudly, like a helicopter preparing for takeoff. There was a blindingly bright series of camera flashes, taking photos in rapid-fire succession. It was a dazzling spectacle that left me feeling like some famous celeb getting ambushed by a small army of paparazzi. At the same moment, a surge of electricity rushed up through my hand and took a lap along every single nerve ending in my body all at once. During my early days as a general contractor, I'd been working at a site where some dealer had installed a series of overhead lights with the worst wiring job I'd ever seen. I'd been removing a section of damaged drywall and ended up connecting to an exposed live wire tucked away behind a stud. That wire had been a house fire waiting to happen, but instead of burning the place down, it sent electricity surging through my pry bar and into my hand. I remembered the experience vividly, and this was just like that. My muscles seized, my body convulsed, and the scent of cooking meat hung thick in my nose. Thanks to the searing pain throbbing in my right palm, it wasn't hard to figure out where the aroma was coming from, but there wasn't a damn thing I could do about it. I'd metaphorically strapped myself to the back of an angry rodeo bull, and now all I could do was hang on for the ride and hope this thing didn't kill me or turn my brain into a bowl of hot mush. After what felt like 1,000 years, the power cut off and I dropped to my knees, gulping in greedy lungfuls of delicious air. Small curls of smoke rose from my hand and drifted up from my arms. My muscles ached and it felt like I'd been wrung out like a wet washcloth. Curiously, however, a host of other minor issues had disappeared. I examined my chest and immediately saw that the bite mark from the toilet snake was no longer fresh and raw, but rather had turned into a faint circle of white scar tissue. With a wince, I jerked my hand away, but when I examined my palm, there wasn't a mark on my skin. It wasn't even red. Mystified, I struggled to my feet and looked down at the pad, fully expecting to see a layer of charred meat plastered to the surface of the palm reader. But there was nothing. I glanced at the tiny digital screen. There was a new message waiting for me. Welcome to your personal virus account, Dan Woodridge, specimen biotag ID number 038-01-B00R7T569C. You have successfully integrated with the progenitor virus variant individual registry upgrade system, iteration 21.2, brought to you by the Variant Research Division, making reality better. Although a small portion of Delvers experience some slight discomfort during the integration process, you have survived. Congratulations! Now that your neural framework and biological blueprint have been successfully scanned and registered with the researcher and the progenitor core, you have full access to a host of new features, including the Subspace Storage System, the Research Department Job Board, and the Delver Interface Portal, which contains your Specimen Bioreport (SBR). To learn more, please use the monolith keypad to select an available option. Subspace Storage System Delver Interface Portal Research Department Job Board. Learn about the Variant Research Project. I scanned the menu, feeling a sense of relief that I was finally going to get a few answers. Although every available option looked fascinating, I skipped down to option 4, Learn about the Variant Research Project, and mashed the button on the metallic keypad with one finger. The semi-translucent prompt screen I'd become so familiar with appeared, hovering just above the monolith's gray plastic exterior. Hope flickered, but then my smile turned to a frown as I read. Whoops. Looks like you've attempted to access an obsolete or out-of-date section of the Delver Interface Portal. These files may have been restricted, deleted, or corrupted. If you'd like to attempt to recover these files, please visit one of the designated research labs located on the lower levels. I skimmed the words once more with annoyance. Why had I honestly expected this place to give me necessary, life-saving information without dicking me around first? Begrudgingly, I thumbed the number 1, Subspace Storage System, hoping this option wasn't broken as well. The error message was whisked away, and new information crawled across the floating screen. Congratulations! As a fully integrated Delver, you can now access your personal subspace storage system, a unique inventory that allows you to store up to 2,000 pounds of physical material in a secure extra-dimensional space, accessible only by you. You may deposit or withdraw items from your subspace storage system at any time thanks to our handy-dandy on-the-go inventory portal. This intuitive system allows you to shred the fabric of space and time without breaking a sweat, storing any non-living items indefinitely. All Variant subspace storage systems are time-locked, meaning any perishable items contained within will remain unspoiled until removed from storage. To obtain a comprehensive, itemized list of all objects stored within your subspace storage system, please visit the Inventory Portal tab at any available monolith. Would you like to view an itemized list of your subspace storage system? Yes, no. I selected yes, half expecting the storage system to be empty, but was pleasantly surprised when a list of items materialized. 8x Copper Delver Luke Token 5x Copper Medic Luke Token 1x Copper Slayer Luke Token 1x Copper Brawler Luke Token 1x Silver Delver Luke Token 1x Silver Medic Luke Token 1x Silver Elementalist Luke Token 1x Gold Weaponsmith Luke Token 1x Gold Ambassador Luke Token 1x Diamond Sentinel Luke Token 1x Ruby Warlord Luke Token Current Weight, 1.75 pounds/2,000 pounds, huh? So that was where all the various loot tokens I'd earned had ended up. I still didn't know what they did or how to use them, but at least now I knew how to get my hands on them. With a thought, I selected one of the Copper Delver loot tokens. A small black rift, like a thin slice in reality itself, appeared in the air beside me. Suspended inside the rift was a single copper coin. Tentatively, I reached in, silently praying the rift didn't snap closed, and cut my arm off at the elbow, and pulled the item free. It was copper and looked like a video game arcade token. On one side were the words Variant Research Division, making reality better. On the other face was the picture of an 8-bit pickaxe encircled by the words Delver Loot Token, no cash value. I held the coin tightly in my hand, but the steady thrum that often emanated from artifacts and relics was absent, and when I tried to examine the token further, nothing came up. This was just a coin. An arcade token, like it said. But if it really was an arcade token, then maybe there was some way to redeem it or use it. Turn it in for a prize, maybe. I'd have to ask Croc about that later. Instead of pocketing the coin, I summoned the black rift in space-time once again and flicked the coin in. The void ate it up, then vanished with a wink. I rechecked the itemized storage list and noted that I had 8 Copper Delver loot tokens once again. Out of sheer curiosity, I reached down and did the same thing with the Zima bottle half full of water from the lobby bathroom. It vanished into the black rift just the same as the coin, then a line item popped up on the inventory list. Zima bottle, half full water. Everything about this place was terrible, but I had to admit that little party trick was almost worth the price of admission. I added a few other items from my pockets and tool belt into the subspace storage system. My endless roll of wipe, the 2 extra tinfoil hat relics, all 8 of my common shards, and a handful of loose screws and nails, which had been rattling around in the bottom of an exterior pouch. The important things I kept on hand, though. All of my tools, the Zima healing elixir, the slammer of shielding, and, of course, the brass compass that had somehow fallen out of the flayed Monarch's spatial core. That I intended to use as soon as possible, but I needed to make a few adjustments before I could equip it. Even though I'd fully integrated with the virus, I still didn't have a high enough perception or resonance. I was hoping the Delver interface portal option would help with that. I jabbed the number 2 button on the keypad, and my inventory list vanished, replaced yet again by a new greeting message. Welcome to your Delver interface portal, which contains your Specimen Bio Report (SBR). The SBR is a comprehensive personal file that contains a host of useful biometric and meta-reality information, including current status conditions, comprehensive injury reports, and a list of all active relics and titles. Any personal enhancement points, earned from level advancement, can also be distributed through the SBR tab, via a monolith. Would you like to view your SBR? Yes, no. I selected yes, and the image on the screen changed. A floating 3D avatar of myself appeared, visible only to my eyes, and beside it was a character sheet. Or a specimen bio report, I guess, although I'd played enough D&D and RPG games to know a character sheet when I saw one. There was a general overview page, which held all of my basic and most pertinent information, name, race, attribute stats, and equipped relics and titles, and several other tabs that covered a wide range of additional information, such as my research achievements, status conditions, and a complete medical record. And when I say complete, I mean complete. It had details from the time I broke my arm in middle school and even the time I got a terrible staph infection after getting bitten by a camel spider in Iraq. On top of past injuries, it also tracked my current health conditions, including a comprehensive, real-time blood work panel that monitored everything from my glucose value to my electrolyte levels and flagged anything that was outside of the standard range. How the system had any of that information was beyond me, but it was certainly impressive. After a quick scan, I moved on to the overview page, which contained the bulk of the relevant information. Dan Woodridge. Specimen Biotag ID number 038-01-B00R7T569C. Variant Assimilation Level, 5. Race, Human, Archetypal. Current experience, 3,715. Next level, 4,250. Personal enhancement points, 20. Underscore. Health, 28. Health Regan hour, 1.3. Stamina reserve, 16. Stamina Regan minute, 1.2. Mana pool, 8. Mana Regan minute, 0.8. Individual adaptive stats. Grit, 6. 5 plus 1 enhanced athleticism, 5. Toughness, 6. Perception, 4. Resonance, 3. Preservation, 1. Spatial core, active. C. Basic Camo Kit, Camouflage Spell, Level 1. C. Tinfoil Hat of Mind Shielding, Level 1. U. Bleach Bolt, the Unidentified Stain Eradicator, Level 1. U. Psychedelic Light Show of Minor Distraction, Level 1. Current titles, Passive. Out of Your League, Death Wish, Marked for Death, Weapon of Opportunity. Although I still didn't understand why I had a specimen bio report or a knockoff D&D character sheet, a lot of the information it contained was intuitive. My health and mana, for instance, and the level progression system. The individual adaptive stats, however, were anything but run-of-the-mill. What the hell was resonance? And why did I only have 1 point in preservation? I mean, I didn't actually know what preservation was, but that seemed insultingly low. As I focused on each, a cracked-out animated paperclip appeared that looked just like Clippy, the old Microsoft Word assistant. Except, somehow, this version radiated the energy of a 57-year-old man with a potbelly, a drinking problem, 2 ex-wives, and a brood of kids who refused to see him even on holidays. It was singly the most depressing animated assistant I'd ever seen. Use the tooltips to learn more shit, the paperclip said morosely. Or don't. It's no skin off my teeth either way. That done, the paperclip removed a pack of cigarettes and lit up a virtual Marlboro Red, seeming to delight in the harsh smoke. Despite his world-weary appearance, the animated paperclip did indeed have some great, if rather unenthusiastic, tooltips, which offered me a curt, though thorough, overview of what each of the various stats was used for. Grit is the epitome of unyielding fortitude and ironclad will. It measures your mental determination, perseverance, and ability to resist sonic attacks and psychic influences. Athleticism measures your overall physical prowess, encompassing strength, speed, and agility. Smash through obstacles, gracefully dodge traps, and strike with unerring precision. Toughness measures your raw physical fortitude, your ability to endure adverse conditions such as pain and fatigue, and to recover from injuries that would cripple or kill lesser beings. In the backrooms, if you aren't smart, you better be tough. Perception measures your awareness and ability to perceive details, such as noticing hidden traps, detecting lies, or sensing danger. This is that smart thing I was talking about before. Resonance measures your connection to the mana that permeates the extra-dimensional superspace between worlds. Greater resonance directly increases your ability to harness the magical power generated by the progenitor core. Preservation measures your ability to withstand and resist the corruption brought on by prolonged exposure to the blight. The best cure for the blight is to not get it. The second best cure is dying. I cannot emphasize this strongly enough, do not contract the blight. I carefully read through each stat, not wanting to miss anything vital, before finally dismissing the overworked paperclip and his tooltips with a wave of one hand. With new knowledge burning through my mind, I went back and re-examined my SBR overview. I wasn't sure what the baseline stats for a normal Joe Blow were, but based on my own stats, I was guessing 8 or 9 must have been at the far end of the bell curve. I wasn't an Olympic athlete by any stretch of the imagination, but I was a former Marine, worked out regularly, and had a physically demanding job. My athleticism was at 5, so I figured that had to be a notch above average. Not great, but not terrible either. Likewise, both my toughness and grit were at 6, which rang true. I may not have been the strongest sumbitch around, but I was tougher than old boot leather and didn't know the meaning of the word quit. But I was far more interested in the fact that I had 20 personal enhancement points to spend. Assuming an 8 really was the upper limit of human ability, if I dropped all 20 points into athleticism, I would officially become stronger than the strongest living person on planet Earth, and it wouldn't even be close. I was tempted to do that, just to see how jacked I got. As entertaining as that thought was, I quickly dismissed it, thinking back to the compass of the catacomber sitting in my tool belt. I wasn't sure what it would do, but it was a mythic emblem, and to use it, I needed a perception of 10 and a resonance of 15. With my current stats, hitting the emblem's base requirements would cost me all but 2 of my personal enhancement points. My gut told me it would be worth it in the long run, even if it was still a big gamble in the short term. I'd been leveling up quickly so far, but that was how these things always went. The early levels were the easiest, but the grind got increasingly more difficult the higher you progressed. I was sure this would be no different. Making this choice was a risk, and it went against my natural instincts, but I knew it was the right thing to do. Before I could talk myself out of it, I dropped 12 points into resonance and 6 into perception. Then, even though it killed me a little on the inside, I used the last 2 points to boost my preservation stat up to 3. I'd heard Croc mention the blight a couple of times, and although it was still just as much of a mystery as everything else in the backrooms, I knew for damn certain I didn't want to get it, especially not if the second best cure was literally just dying. With my points distributed, it was finally time to see what the compass of the catacomber could do. Chapter 13. I looked over my newly upgraded stats once more before closing out my SBR tab. Dan Woodridge. Specimen Biotag ID number 038-01-B00R7T569C. Variant Assimilation Level, 5. Race, Human, Archetypal. Current Experience, 3715. Next Level, 4250. Personal Enhancement Points, 0. ____________. Health, 28. Health Regen Hour, 1.3. ____________. Stamina Reserve, 16. Stamina Regen Minute, 1.2. ___________. Mana Pool, 35. Mana Regen Minute, 2.9. Individual Adaptive Stats. Grit, 6. 5 plus 1 Enhanced Athleticism, 5. Toughness, 6. Perception, 10. Resonance, 15. Preservation, 3. The only thing that had really changed was the size of my mana pool and my mana regeneration rate. The overall amount of mana I had at my disposal had quadrupled and my regen rate had tripled. I could now cast Bleach Bolt 7 times in rapid-fire succession before running dry. It still felt like my regen rate was as slow as an narcoleptic sloth, but that just meant I needed to pace myself, be strategic in how I used the spells I had at my disposal. I closed the monolith menu screen and fished out the brass compass, holding it flat against my palm. Time to see if this horse could run. Compass of the Catacomber. Mythic Emblem. The backrooms are filled with 1,000 dangers, from lethal traps to ravenous dwellers, but none are more deadly than the murky, ever-twisting, ever-changing corridors of the backrooms themselves. Though many delvers perish at the claws and fangs of inhuman horrors, even more die thirsty, hungry, and alone, trapped in a dark room with no way out. Not the Catacomber. The Catacomber is a twisted blend of cartographer and cryptic graveyard robber. Though lacking in combat prowess, a unique blend of skills and spells allows those holding this mythic emblem to map the uncharted depths, effortlessly venturing where others fear to tread. In a world of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. The Catacomber has both eyes open and a torch that will never go out. As I finished reading over the emblem description, I was surprised by how different it was than the other relics I'd seen so far. Each relic was essentially a single skill or spell, which could be leveled up, swapped out, or forged into more powerful skills at will. But they were always just a single ability. This was different. This read like an RPG class description. A class that specialized not in combat or even spell slinging, but in navigation. I'd played D&D and online MMOs for years, and I always tended toward the brawler builds. Hit first, hit hard, ask questions later. Under any other circumstances, I would have run as fast as possible to get away from a lame-ass class that revolved around disarming traps or making maps. Even now it sounded so incredibly boring. But I wasn't playing a game, I reminded myself. This was my life, and I was trapped inside of an endless labyrinth where everything, including the furniture, was deadly. Because I'd invested the bulk of my personal enhancement points into perception and resonance, I was as squishy and vulnerable as a basket of newborn kittens. But if the emblem allowed me to avoid fights, sidestep pitfalls, and find shelter, it would be well worth my comparatively abysmal athleticism and toughness score. I peeled my gaze away from the catacomber description and looked at the 6 emblem slots listed beneath. In essence, each one was a distinct relic, all fused together under one umbrella, just like Crockett explained. Underscore. Emblem slot 1, Mapmaker's Eye. Fabled relic, fully tempered. Level 15. Mapmaker's Eye is a passive feature that allows the catacomber to generate a visual map of the backrooms as they explore. Unexplored areas stay veiled by the fog of war, but once a section has been visited, the floor map will remain intact even after a floor shift occurs. The presence of benign and hostile dwellers, secret doorways, and other delvers will also be indicated on the map. Emblem slot 2, Surveyor's Mark. Rare relic, fully tempered. Level 15. The backrooms are a living organism, and as such, the corridors, rooms, and byways that make up each floor are extremely resistant to external change. Trying to alter or even mark the surface in any way is futile at best and potentially life-threatening at worst. Surveyor's Mark is a passive ability that allows the catacomber to mark their path through the backrooms, leaving a trail others can follow. Emblem slot 3, Spelunker's Sixth Sense. Fabled relic, fully tempered. Level 15. After years of traversing treacherous tunnels and crumbling ruins, the catacomber has developed an uncanny passive ability to detect insidious traps and spot concealed foes with almost casual indifference. Many develop an almost perverse fascination with disarming and rearming the traps, often to the rage of those who laid them in the first place. Their uncanny passive ability also allows them to spot loot from a mile off, much to the envy of their fellow adventurers. I whistled through my teeth as I read. The first 3 abilities alone were enough to make the compass of the catacomber a priceless item that anyone inside the backrooms would kill for. I'd spent less than a day here, but after wandering aimlessly through the lobby, constantly on the move from unseen threats, stalking me from dim shadows, I knew exactly how miserable, disorienting, and dangerous this place was. Even my rudimentary attempts at creating a map had proven useful, but in a place this size, I doubted that working around with reams of paper was a tenable solution. But a map that I could look at in real time, and one that actively labeled secret passageways or hostile enemies? Yeah, that would make life considerably easier. That, paired with Spelunker's Sixth Sense, would let me easily avoid so many of the environmental dangers the backrooms had to offer. Sure, I'd still have to worry about running into a gang of cannibalistic delvers or roaming packs of tentacle-faced dwellers, but I wouldn't have to worry about accidentally having my face melted off by an acidic water fountain. Surveyor's Mark was less immediately applicable, especially since I had the map to help guide my feet and I was currently alone. If it was included with the emblem, however, I was sure there was a good reason for it. If the first 3 abilities made the emblem priceless, the last 3 made it a treasure fit only for a king. Or for a god. Emblem slot 4, the Researcher's Codex. Fabled relic, fully tempered. Level 15. Despite its current function, the progenitor ship was originally designed as a researcher vessel. As such, it contains a host of valuable information on all the delvers and dwellers who now inhabit its endless and ever-changing corridors. This passive skill grants the Catacomber a credential key for all restricted variant research division labs and additional insight into the varied inhabitants of the backrooms, including their strengths, weaknesses, skills, and behaviors. The researcher's codex notes will be accessed, compiled, and disseminated through your localized administrator. Emblem Slot 5, Pathfinder's Unerring Arrow. Fabled Relic Fully Tempered. Level 15. Range, Line of Sight. Cost, 30 mana. Duration, 30 seconds. Using the Pathfinder's Unerring Arrow, the Catacomber conjures an illusionary blue arrow, visible only to them, which will lead unerringly to any objective fixed firmly in the Catacomber's mind. With each step taken, the conjured arrow extends its reach, always pointing in the optimal direction, bypassing obstacles, dangers, and hindrances, which allows the caster to navigate even the most treacherous environments with unflagging confidence. Emblem Slot 6, Corvo's Blanket Fort. Mythic Relic Fully Tempered. Level 15. Kids all over the world are well acquainted with the boundless joy of rearranging and repurposing couch cushions and bed blankets to make an awesome fort. This is just the grown-up, extra-dimensional version of that. Use Corvo's Blanket Fort ability to cordon off a portion of the backrooms and claim it as your own, transforming the area into a cozy little pocket dimension that you can always retreat to when the going gets too rough. As with any good blanket fort, your pocket dimension can grow by adding extra material. The Catacomber can add 2,500 square feet of space to their blanket fort for every variant assimilation level earned. Think of it as a high-end real estate investment, only with fewer property taxes and more flesh-eating monsters. But the best is yet to come. As with all real estate, they say it's all about location, 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 and with Blanket Fort, you always have an optimal location. This ability allows the Catacomber to create one doorway anchor per 2 variant assimilation levels. A doorway anchor can transform any standard door within the backrooms into a dimensional gateway that connects directly to their slice of paradise. Doorway anchors can be moved at any time and may be set to private or public, restricting who can enter the comfort of your own personal hell. For a full list of Blanket Fort features and options, please see the Blanket Fort D Operations Manual, available after claiming your first section of the backrooms. As I finished reading, a cold sweat washed over me, and I found myself acutely aware of how much trouble I was in. The compass of the Catacomber was amazing didn't quite feel like an adequate term, but I wasn't sure anything else fit. Incredible? Astonishing? Divine? It was all of those things and then some. In the backrooms, knowledge was power, which made the researcher's codex a weapon that would start paying dividends the second I used it. And it was nothing compared to Pathfinder's Unerring Arrow or the ridiculously named Corvo's Blanket Fort. Although mapmaker's eye would allow me to draft a map in real time, it was still limited in scope. I needed to physically go someplace before the fog of war lifted, but Pathfinder's Unerring Arrow would allow me to sidestep that limitation. It could take me anywhere I wanted to go with a thought. Need a stairwell? Just think of one. Food running low? A little magic, a splash of razzle-dazzle, and boom, I'd know exactly how to get there in the quickest, most efficient manner possible. As for the mythic Corvo's Blanket Fort ability, I literally couldn't think of a more powerful skill in an endless, ever-changing dungeon. With that, I could create a safe haven, one which would be accessible at any point from any location within the backrooms, and unlike the other relics, this one would scale with me over time. I could attach more and more spaces as I leveled up, until I essentially had my own self-contained kingdom with everything I could possibly need within. It was awesome. That was also the problem. It was too awesome. It didn't take a genius to realize that this was the kind of power kingdoms were built upon. Literally, in this case. I wasn't sure how the grizzled gunslinger with the foam anime sword had knocked this emblem out of the flayed monarch's spatial core. Probably some sort of specialized relic or artifact, if I had to guess, But there was one thing I knew as certain as the sun rose in the east and set in the west: the flayed monarch would come looking for this particular lost treasure. Even if I somehow managed to give the compass back to the eldritch warlord, I got the sense he wasn't exactly the forgiving type. More the slice your skin off, boil you in oil, then hang you to death with loops of your own intestine type. This compass had effectively painted a target on my back that was visible from outer space. Sure, the back rooms were enormous, but I got the sense that the monarch had eyes, ears, and hands all over the place. It was only a matter of time before a member of the skinless court found me. Once they did, the flayed monarch would come a-calling, and when that happened, I'd be a dead man. End of story. Unless I figured out a way to use the compass to my advantage. But therein lay the second problem. Although each of the relics contained within the emblem was ridiculously overpowered in their own way, they weren't ridiculously overpowered in the right way. I had a bunch of high-end screwdrivers when all I really needed was a rugged, hard-hitting sledgehammer. Sure, they would help me survive the backrooms, but they wouldn't help me survive the wrath of an angry god, and that was my long-term goal. Really, my only goal at this point. Every single skill was utility-oriented. None of them would make me stronger, faster, or offer me extraordinary combat capabilities. They offered information, convenience, and safety. Under any other set of circumstances, finding the emblem would have been a one-way ticket to Easy Street in the backrooms. But given my particular situation, it would only delay my inevitable, and very painful, death. What I needed were artifacts and relics. God tier ones. The battle between the gunslinger and the monarch played out in my head, just like it had 100 times before. A cloud of telekinetically controlled flying weapons. A legion of loyal minions. Corrosive rain that melted anything it touched. The ability to blink effortlessly through space and time. To throw lightning bolts from the palm of one hand. That's what real power looked like. The compass couldn't give me any of that. Not directly anyway. But the barest shadow of an idea began to form. True, the compass couldn't directly give me the power to go toe-to-toe with the monarch, but maybe there was a way it could indirectly help me achieve my long-term goals. I ran one hand absently through my hair as I turned that notion over and over inside my head. Information, convenience, and safety. As the words tumbled through my skull like a record stuck on loop, it hit me. Information, convenience, and safety weren't just me problems. They were problems for literally every single soul trapped inside the backrooms. That's why the compass was so valuable in the first place. Even the most capable delvers, beings with unimaginable, godlike power, still needed food to eat and a place to sleep. They still needed safety and information. That was a universal problem, and it just so happened that I had a universal solution. My dad had been a serial entrepreneur, always moving from business to business and side hustle to side hustle. He would invent things or fix things or sell things. Sometimes he'd buy junk from the flea market and try to flip it, like they do on those HGTV shows. He was never very good at it. Other times, when money was tight, he'd do odd jobs, tinkering with lawnmowers or installing fences on the cheap. I'd never met someone handier with a wrench, but he also had the follow-through of a bored toddler. My dad was a hard worker, but he also dreamed about easy money and had enough get-rich-quick schemes to fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool. The cold, hard truth of it was his ideas rarely panned out. Most times they bit him in the ass. There was one thing about business that he taught me, however, which had stuck with me even all these years later. If enough people have the same problem and you can fix it, then you've got yourself a license to print money. Unerring arrow, as useful as it was, could only help me. Same thing with mapmakers or spelunkers' sixth sense. But Corvo's blanket fort? Well, that could help everyone. What if, instead of transforming the blanket fort into my own, personal fortress of solitude, I made it a place that specifically catered to other delvers? A place where they could come to buy, sell, and trade? A place to grab a bite to eat without having to worry about whether something was going to eat you instead? A refuge to catch a few minutes of uninterrupted shut-eye without the constant fear that you would never wake up again? From my handful of correspondences with the researcher, I knew there were safe harbors that served a similar function. But unlike the safe harbors, my trading hub would be faction neutral, except for the dickheads from the skinless court, of course, who could go fuck themselves, and, even more important, there would be access points far and wide. With enough elbow grease, I could plant doorways on damn near every floor. I could even plant them in every safe harbor, creating a fast travel network for delvers to move through. Hell, being able to reliably move from floor to floor would solve a whole host of problems I hadn't even considered yet. And inside this glorious hub, I'd have everything anyone could ever need to survive the backrooms. Supplies. Food. Safety. Intel. All of it. And in payment, I'd collect relics and artifacts for myself. Not to mention countless favors and endless goodwill, which I would hopefully be able to leverage against the flayed monarch. As things stood, there was no way I could beat the monarch alone, but maybe I could do it through the power of teamwork. Teamwork and a splash of capitalism. This was my best, or, more realistically, my only, shot at long-term survival. The only question now was, what kind of store did I start with? What would serve as the beating heart of my backrooms trading empire? A hotel of some sort was the first place my mind immediately jumped to. The backrooms were a nightmare, and finding a safe location to rest was a dubious proposition at best. Most hotels usually had a small, attached restaurant and a little gift shop that I could use to sell items. That was a solid option, but there were also a few complications. First off, even small hotels were big. Picking up a hotel straight out of the gate would burn through the majority of my square footage, and there was no way I'd be able to properly run anything larger than a quaint bed and breakfast without staff. I'd need a cook, cleaners, someone to work the front desk and handle check-ins, plus another person to deal with the shop. That was a goal I could work toward long-term, but for now, I needed something smaller and more efficient that focused on what I really wanted to accomplish, acquiring all the relics and artifacts I could get my hands on. I could resell the worthless relics or sacrifice them to level up the relics in my spatial core, but I was also bound to come across some useful items that would allow me to get more powerful as well. The hotel idea was out. At least for now. Next, my mind skipped to a grocery store. That could be a solid option, too. Smaller. Easier to manage. I could find a camping surplus store to raid, then set up a few cots for folks looking to sleep. The accommodations wouldn't be glamorous, but it would be safe, and people would pay a hefty premium for safety. It would also have ample food and supplies, though restocking things like fresh produce or meat would be extremely difficult. Plus, once I got to thinking about it, I realized most of the items inside a grocery store were luxury goods. No one would have access to a fridge or a pantry, although that could probably be circumvented by using the subspace storage system. The storage system was time-locked, after all, which meant any perishable items stored within would stay good indefinitely. Still, the thought of some post-apocalyptic survivor taking the time to make a home-cooked meal seemed laughable. Food that was quick and easy to eat on the go like beef jerky, chips, or protein bars would be far more useful. The grocery store was better than the hotel, but still too specialized. What I really needed was an old-timey general store. Like the kind of place that would exist in an 1800s western frontier town. A location that was small and manageable, with just enough room to set up sleeping spaces, that also had a little bit of everything. Food. Medicine. Basic hygiene gear. Decent bathrooms. Survival items. Good shelf space. Eventually, I'd be able to attach other structures, but the general store would serve as the beating heart of the operation. But what the hell was the modern equivalent of a frontier general store? A Walmart, maybe. That was in the right ballpark but had a lot of the same problems as the hotel. Too big. Too much shit. Impossible to manage, even with Croc's help. What about a gas station? No. That had the opposite problem. Too small, not enough shit. I continued to kick it around, running my hand along the stubble of my jaw. I'd need to trim my beard before too much longer. My fingers froze as I abruptly recalled the last time I'd taken a vacation. I'd been running late for my flight, and I'd packed up all my hygiene gear in a frantic flurry, throwing stuff blindly into my travel bag. In the rush, I'd forgotten to grab my razor from the shower. I'd needed to buy a new one before I ended up looking like a disheveled marmot, so I'd stopped by the one place that I was certain would have what I needed. Because they had a little bit of everything. In a flash that felt like divine revelation, I knew exactly what I needed to find. Tobe continued,